But lately, tensions have escalated precariously in another part of the South China Sea, the waters off the western coast of the Philippines.
All ahead. All ahead.
It was supposed to be for a routine mission, resupplying ships and stations in the South China Sea. Philippine crew members prepared for that possibility and stood by the hatch holding clubs.
The South China Sea has always been a boiling cauldron of ambition, history, and power. But at Scarborough Shoal, that shallow triangle of reef and rock in the Philippine Sea, the tension between China and the United States came closer than anyone expected to spilling into outright confrontation. What began as a provocation turned into a high-stakes chess match with global consequences, a test of pride, power, and patience that shocked the world with its ending. It started quietly, as these things often do. Chinese maritime militia, fishing boats in appearance but military auxiliaries in reality, pushed deeper into waters internationally recognized as part of the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. They dropped nets, raised flags, and acted as if they owned the sea. For Beijing, it was an incremental move, a way to cement its claim over what it called indisputable Chinese territory. For Manila, it was another violation of sovereignty, another humiliation on its own doorstep. And for Washington, bound by its defense treaty with the Philippines, it was a challenge that could not be ignored. The U.S. had been watching Scarborough Shoal for years.
Where an international tribunal ruled the Philippines has exclusive economic rights. But China claims almost all of the South China Sea.
Kasok 134, Kasok 134.
When we boarded the Philippine Coast Guard ship Cape Engano last month, but in the middle of our first night, sirens raged. Crew members rushed between decks.
Satellite imagery showed new Chinese deployments, radar dishes hidden under tarps, strange floating platforms that could anchor bigger vessels. The Pentagon feared that Scarborough could become another artificial fortress like the Spratly Islands, bristling with runways, anti-ship missiles, and radar arrays. That would put China within striking distance of Manila and lock down the South China Sea like a Chinese lake. The stakes were enormous. A third of global trade flows through these waters, and whoever controls them controls the arteries of world commerce. When Chinese Coast Guard cutters appeared near the shoal, shadowing Philippine supply ships and chasing away fishermen, the stage was set. The Philippines filed protests. China brushed them aside. Then, almost casually, Beijing sent 2 naval frigates into the contested waters. That was the moment the U.S. decided to act. A carrier strike group, led by the USS Ronald Reagan, steamed toward the shoal. Alongside it came destroyers, supply ships, and a screen of submarines operating silently below. The White House issued a statement affirming its ironclad commitment to defend its ally. Beijing's response was equally defiant. The South China Sea was China's ancestral sea, and no foreign power had the right to interfere. Both sides dug in, the rhetoric escalating to a fever pitch. What the world didn't see at first were the near misses happening on the water itself. American P-8 Poseidon reconnaissance planes buzzed overhead, sending live feeds back to the Pentagon. Chinese J-11 fighters tailed them, sometimes closing to within 20 feet, so close that pilots could see each other's helmets. On the sea, Chinese Coast Guard ships crossed the bows of U.S. destroyers, missing collisions by yards. Every encounter carried the risk of disaster. One wrong turn, one nervous finger on a trigger, and history could change in an instant. The Filipino fishermen who had once worked these waters watched from a distance, stunned. Their small wooden bancas bobbed in the swells as superpowers flexed their muscles above them. For them, Scarborough wasn't about grand strategy. It was about food, family, survival. But now the shoal was no longer theirs. It had become a stage for giants. The showdown reached its peak when China did the unthinkable. In the dead of night, its navy deployed a flotilla of sand-pumping dredgers near the shoal. The intention was unmistakable. They were preparing to build. To Washington, this was the red line. Scarborough would not become another artificial island fortress. The order went out: intercept the dredgers, stop construction, by force if necessary. What followed was one of the most dangerous standoffs since the Cold War. U.S. destroyers closed in on the Chinese ships. Helicopters roared overhead. Chinese frigates trained fire control radar on the Americans, a hostile act one step short of firing. American crews scrambled to battle stations. Fingers hovered over missile launch consoles. And then, in a shocking twist, something happened that nobody expected. As the world braced for shots to be fired, Beijing abruptly ordered the dredgers to turn around. They withdrew from Scarborough, escorted back to Hainan Island by warships. Chinese state media offered only a cryptic explanation. Strategic recalibration, Washington claimed it had upheld international law. But insiders soon revealed the truth. A secret back channel had opened between the White House and Zhongnanhai. U.S. intelligence had discovered that China's economy, already staggering under the weight of slow growth and debt, could not afford a crippling trade war if fighting broke out. At the same time, Beijing realized that pushing Scarborough too far risked drawing in not just the U.S. but also Japan and Australia, allies ready to defend freedom of navigation. The ending shocked everyone because it wasn't a clash of missiles or an exchange of fire, but a quiet climb down. China had tested the limits and found them harder than expected. The U.S. had shown resolve without firing a shot. And the Philippines, though relieved, understood the lesson. Their fate was a bargaining chip in a larger game. But the calm was deceptive. Analysts warned that Scarborough was not the end but only a pause. China had not abandoned its ambitions. It had simply chosen a tactical retreat. Already, satellite images showed new activity at Mischief Reef and Subi Reef. Beijing was playing the long game, waiting for a moment when America's attention was elsewhere. Meanwhile, Washington had scored a victory, but one that came with the burden of constant vigilance. In Manila, the story was told differently. Some saw the U.S. as savior, standing up for Filipino rights in their own waters. Others grumbled that the Philippines had become a pawn between empires. Ordinary fishermen returned to the sea, but they did so nervously, knowing that Chinese Coast Guard cutters could appear again at any time. The shoal was no longer just coral and sand, it was a symbol of sovereignty, survival, and struggle. For Beijing, the retreat at Scarborough was quietly reframed as a strategic success. Propaganda outlets claimed China had exercised restraint and avoided war, painting the move as magnanimous rather than forced. Behind closed doors, however, military planners studied the lessons carefully. They began accelerating efforts to harden other outposts, ensuring that next time retreat would not be an option. In Washington, the episode became a case study in deterrence. The Pentagon celebrated it as proof that American naval power still had teeth. Yet some strategists worried. The standoff had revealed just how thin the margin of safety was. One collision, one misread radar lock, and the outcome could have been catastrophic. The South China Sea remained a tinderbox, waiting for the next spark. What shocked the world was not only that China had blinked, but also how close both sides had come to war without meaning to. The ending was a reminder of the knife-edge balance of power in Asia. A reminder that the greatest danger was not deliberate aggression but miscalculation. And a reminder that at Scarborough Shoal, the future of peace and war could hinge on the actions of a single pilot, a single sailor, a single decision in the heat of the moment. Scarborough became a legend, a story told in military academies and diplomatic circles. The shoal itself remained the same, shallow waters, rich in fish, ringed by coral. But for those who had seen the brink of disaster, it was forever transformed. It was proof that power must be handled with caution, and that sometimes the most shocking ending is not fire and fury, but the silence of ships turning away from the edge.